Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had greaves of bronze on his legs, which, if you play soccer or you know people who play soccer, you know they wear these shin guards. That's what a greave is, only it was made of bronze, of a metal, okay? So he was guarding his shins. And he had a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. Pew! Okay? The shaft of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "Today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we may fight together." So in other words, the Philistine army was really strong. And not only that, they had one soldier in particular who was really, really strong. They used measurements that we don't use today, cubits and spans, but what that really generally meant was he was somewhere between like 6.5 and 7 feet tall or even more. That's taller than most anyone in here today. There are a few guys here who are almost that big, but not quite as big as Goliath. And actually, back in those days, people were generally shorter, so the fact that Goliath was around 7 feet tall was extremely unusual. And along with his extreme height, we can surmise that he was also very strong because he was carrying around this heavy, heavy armor that was over his whole body, and he was carrying these really heavy weapons. So not only was he tall, he was also strong, a very intimidating opponent. And here he was, standing before the army of Israel, challenging them to find a soldier among their ranks who would dare to fight against him. And this is what happened next after Goliath made his challenge. When King Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. In other words, they were really, really scared, like, who's going to fight this guy? And now we're going to hear about David coming to the place where the battle was to be fought. He'd been out tending sheep, like way far away during the night. Okay, and this is what happened next, reading again from the Bible. David, who was way far away, rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. You see, Jesse was David's father, and all of David's brothers were in the army. And his father had told David, when you get done tending the sheep for the night, I want you to go home, get some food and other supplies, and bring it out to your brothers. So that's what David was going to do. Okay? Continuing on, it says, he came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. David could see things were not going well for the army of Israel. He felt he had to do something. David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. He said, "What's going on here?" And he talked with them. And then the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath, came out again and spoke the same words as before. "I defy you, send a man to fight against me." And this time David heard him. And David said to King Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. your servant will go and fight against him." Saul said to David, "You're not able to go fight against this Philistine. You're just a boy, and he's been a warrior since his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came out and took a lamb from the flock, if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaws, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine." In other words, David said, "Just give me a chance to prove myself. I can do this. I can fight against Goliath, and I know I can win." Well, no one else was stepping forward to try. So Saul really didn't have much of a choice but to let David give it a shot. So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." And he said, "Okay, David, if you're going to fight Goliath, you need some proper battle attire." So this is what it says. Saul clothed David with his armor, with Saul's very own armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head, and he put a coat of mail on his body. David strapped Saul's sword over his armor, and he tried in vain to walk. But he wasn't used to wearing armor like this or a helmet on his head. And David said, "I can't wear this stuff. I'm not used to this." And he took off the armor and put down the sword. And then he took his staff in his hand, like a big stick. And then he went over to the river, and he got out 5 smooth stones, and he put them in a little pouch. And then he took his sling in his hand, and he said, "Now I'm ready." And he went out, and he drew near to Goliath, the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and looked at David and said, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Send a man to fight me." David said, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." And he said, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head." That's what he said. "And I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." Then the Philistine drew nearer to David, and David ran quickly to the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine in his forehead, and Goliath fell down dead. That's what happened. Right there. David won the battle. Little David. He had no armor on, no helmet on his head, no sword, no shield. He had his little sling, 5 little rocks. Boom. So, the story of David and Goliath provides us with some very helpful and important ideas that we can view in light of our own lives as we each strive in our own way to reach our own potential. One very obvious idea from the story is the notion of standing up to forces that seem to be impossible to overcome. To that end, I have a story from my own life that I want to share. It's a lesson I learned several years ago from my friend and mentor, a lesson that I tried to apply to my own life in a situation which the application did not herald the results I expected, and therefore I had to take a step back and learn the broader lesson. So this is what happened first, beginning with my friend. One day, he was hauling gravel in a gravel trailer. This is like on the back of a semi, big gravel trailer, comes down like this, and it was this kind called like a belly dump where it comes out in the middle. Okay, so the truck was parked on the side of a field near a well-traveled blacktop road. And in a freak accident, which is how most accidents could be classified, my friend somehow got his hand caught in the mechanism that controls the flow of gravel. So like underneath like this. And it's like a vise, and it's under a lot of pressure. My friend was on the side of the truck that was facing the field so that a passerby on the road would not be able to see him. And he couldn't reach his cell phone. And his hand was caught and was being crushed by the pressure of the mechanism. And no one knew he was in trouble. So I'm going to jump to the end of the story so I can move on to the lesson and what happened next. Okay, so a car happened to drive by, going one way, noticed the truck, didn't think anything of it, truck parked on the edge of a field, ordinary sight. Fortunately, that same car passed by again quite a while later, and this time the scene struck them as suspicious because the truck was in the very same spot as it had been when they had passed by a couple hours earlier. They didn't see any people moving around, no truck, so they stopped to investigate and discovered my friend caught like this on the other side of the truck. They got his hand out of the mechanism. He went to the hospital, was treated for his injuries, and fortunately suffered no long-term damage as a result of the accident. The next day, he was telling me the story of everything that had happened, and he said something that I will never forget, even though as he told it in passing, he might not remember even having made this particular comment, but he said, while his hand was caught in that mechanism, he started feeling lightheaded. As you can imagine, from the shock to his system on the nerves of his hand being crushed, and also the grave concern of what the long-term damage might be. All of a sudden, he started worrying that he was going to pass out, which he knew would really exacerbate an already very tenuous situation. So in that moment, he took a pause, and he studied his thoughts. When he realized he was probably going to pass out, he studied his thoughts, and this is what he told me that he said to himself. He stopped, and he thought to himself, okay, I know how I'm going to do this. And he came up with some plan in that moment that would keep his mind focused on what he deemed to be the most crucial part of staying conscious. It was the best he could hope for at that moment in time, but he was going to do that. If he could do nothing else, he had decided he was going to stay conscious. And I'll never forget those words. Okay, I know how I'm going to do this. And the effort he put forth to control whatever part of that particular situation that he had control over, which wasn't much, but what he could control, he decided how to use it to his full advantage. So that struck me as a powerful lesson, and this is where the story of how I first tried to apply that line of thinking in my life gets a little like goofy, like when it said, if we're crazy, it's for the Lord. That's what this story is going to be like, seriously? But I just have to share it because it is a broader lesson and also ties into the lessons from David fighting Goliath. So not long after this event of my friend getting his hand caught in a gravel trailer, I was at the county fair in my hometown. This was several years ago, and there was this ride that our oldest son, Marshall, wanted to go on. He was a lot younger at that time, and I was wanted to go on a ride with him because he wants to go on this ride. Mom, will you go on a ride with me? Well, I want to look like I can do this, so I decided I'll go on a ride. It was a ride that can make you dizzy, which doesn't always really go so well for me. But I like to go on the rides with the kids, so I decided to go. After I was strapped in, wondering if I had made the right choice, I thought of my friend and that one striking comment that he made, okay, I know how I'm going to do this. And literally, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm literally going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out a way that, how am I going to do this? Because I know I can do this. And I looked down at my shoe, and I thought to myself, I know if I just stare at my shoe the whole ride, I will not get dizzy. And I can get through this ride with no problems, just like my friend didn't pass out that gravel trail. I know I can do this. Guess what? It didn't work. When I got off that ride, I was nauseous for at least 4 hours. Now, this is how it applies to the story of David and Goliath. Okay? Because it took great courage for David to volunteer to go fight Goliath. But it took more than just courage. It took wisdom. Wisdom to know exactly what was required for him to be victorious. First of all, Saul wanted to suit David up with his armor and his battle gear. This made sense to Saul. Of course, that is what Saul was used to. The armor fit Saul because it was made for him. It was not made for David. Saul's armor did not fit David, nor was David used to wearing armor. David had fortitude, but he also had wisdom. He knew enough to know what would impede his ability to win and what would allow him to have success. We do have to have fortitude to reach our potential, to accomplish our goals, but we also need to employ wisdom, examining what our particular strengths are and capitalizing on them, knowing that what works for someone else may not work for us. I thought I could ride that ride without getting sick simply because I decided I was going to do it. That was foolishness on my part. It would be foolish of any of us to think that the only thing necessary to accomplish something is the will to do it. My little account of attempting to ride an amusement park ride might seem small compared to David fighting Goliath, or any number of examples of such a challenge that could be encountered in our lives. But I use this story to illustrate really how foolish it is to simply think that the will to do something is enough to override any other reality. I ignored realities that I shouldn't have, realities about myself that are unique to me, that are real. Each of us has unique potential, and each of us has unique limitations. Both need to be acknowledged, respected, and considered as we move forward in implementing any plan. David did not enter into a battle with Goliath in an instant. Upon hearing Goliath's words of challenge, he didn't simply shove his brothers aside and King Saul aside and run out like a fool to fight him. No. He received input from Saul, a seasoned warrior. Then he considered his own skills and his experience. And in so doing, he devised the best approach for himself. And that is how he was able to defeat Goliath. The Lord has endowed each one of us with many things that all need to be used in tandem in order to reach our unique potential. Each of us can accomplish great things in our lives, just like David did, because God has equipped each of us in very unique ways. Amen.